I am here speaking today with Jessica. Jessica, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jessica Dene Earley-Cha. I am a developer advocate for Google Assistant. And that pretty much means I get to play with all the new technologies for the Actions on Google platform and test them out and try to make sure that things are working and teach that to other people. And the best part is by teaching and educating and creating content, people could tell me what they think is good and not so great. And I can give that feedback back to our engineers and product team and make the platform better.
Wow, that's an amazing role. Do you mind telling me a little bit about how you got into that role?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. DevRel was not something I necessarily thought I was going to get into, but when I decided to transition and move into tech, I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to do something that had to do with technology and with community and teaching. And I was actually teaching at a software boot camp that I went to, and
Cool.
I really enjoyed that. That was fun. And one day I got an email from a recruiter from Google and I read it and I freaked out and I deleted it. And I had to Google how do you undelete Gmail
Oh my
emails.
God.
So Google found me, but I was doing a lot of community work and teaching because that's something I really enjoy.
That's really cool. So part of your job is to almost like support people that are developing on the assistant platform, right? Whether that's people that are within Google or outside of Google. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so you probably interface with conversational designers and people looking to get into the voice space more than the average person. And I would love to know, not to put you on the spot, but I'd love to know if there's any like trends that you see in that
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, when it comes, especially like conversation design, there is no like this is the degree
Yeah.
to get a conversation design degree, which is great. So I've been seeing people coming from linguistic backgrounds, people who are really interested in language, people coming from cultural spaces. So people have done a lot of active work within um, different marginal groups, getting involved as well, and then kind of your in the tech world, kind of your regular designer. So someone
Hmm.
who is designing GUIs and the graphical interface, they're seeing like voice is a really exciting space. So it's a really diverse place, which is exciting. And the
Yeah.
fact that it's accessible more than historically, like other technologies, because it's
Yeah.
happening now. I think that's the best part is we get to have amazing people within the group.
So what would you say is a great way for someone who's looking to get into voice to start off?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I would say I have two recommendations, one
Okay.
for the engineer and one for the designer, because I
Hmm.
do think they're kind of separate paths.
Hmm.
So definitely for the engineer is to actually both of them build things,
Yeah.
start designing. You don't have to do this as work or for something that is uh, for a thing that you have to
Hmm.
get paid for, but like play around with it and start making a handful of projects just to get experience
Yeah.
doing that. And then, of course, connecting with groups like Women in Voice,
Hmm.
like just connecting and talking to people, I think is the best way just to network. But of course, whenever you make a project, the way I got known within my own kind of sub community that I was part of is I wrote blogs and I made videos. So I'm
Yeah.
all about the information sharing. So if you learn something cool, if you notice something, share it around. That's how people get to know who you are. And then you get to meet other people who like to share knowledge too.
For sure. That's really good advice. I know that I'm constantly sharing things, and like you said, this space is so new that there's not too many voices in there quite yet, and so there's really that opportunity to like learn from people and like make yourself be heard as well. So when I started out in this like space, the conversation design, the voice space, I started working on Dialogflow, building actions. Is that what you're referring to when you're asking people to build something on like a Google platform?
Yeah, you could definitely use Dialogflow. It's a fantastic tool, but the tooling itself is great when it comes to more on the bot, like the chatbot side. And we've actually launched recently a new tooling that does what Dialogflow did, but it's specified to actions on Google and to Google Assistant because this is all mainly voice driven. And so we want to make sure that that was the priority. And so we launched Actions Builder and Actions SDK. And these two tooling are interchangeable, and they replace the NLU, the natural language understanding, which processes all of your users' input and helps you generate prompts back. There is a difference when it comes to the way that it's organized. And with Dialogflow, it was very much a user said this, and this is the response that when that intent gets matched, right?
Hmm.
So those two things were together. And if you had something like, if the user said yes to starting to play a game, you would have a yes intent that gets matched, starts the game.
Hmm.
But if you had a yes intent for taking a potion inside the game, you had to use context to kind of filter and make sure that yes belonged to the right spot in the conversation, which isn't as intuitive and it's a
Right.
little harder
Yeah.
to build out. And so when we were thinking about, okay, how can we make sure it's more voice forward, Actions Builder is designed that in a way that's called state based,
Hmm.
more along that route. And pretty much what that means is we have this idea of scenes.
Okay.
And scenes are the idea of like a scene in a play. So we're in the scene of the greeting. And so, you come in and you're in the scene. And so the prompt will be something to the fact of like, welcome to my game. And if they say yes, it still matches to an intent,
Hmm.
but the intent is tethered to the scene, right? And
Oh,
so you could
okay.
still transition to different scenes in the game and you could still use the same yes intent, but because you're in the potion taking scene, when they say yes,
Yeah.
that prompt gets generated. And so instead of having your intents be kind of tethered to your prompts,
Yeah.
it's tethered to the scene. And so your scene is actually managing the construction of the prompt, which is different.
Yeah.
At first, for me, when I was learning
Hmm.
this, I was like, oh, it's a little bit of a mental jump. But now I'm like, this makes so much sense. And so people who are new and this is their first time building for Actions on Google,
Yeah.
actually, this is a lot easier to build than what we
That's
had
so
before.
that's so great. That's so good to know. How do you recommend that people get started building actions on Google?
Yeah, so I'm a little biased because I helped build this out.
Of
So
course.
just in all transparency, but we do have code labs, and so code labs are historically really angled and aimed towards developers.
Hmm.
And we're mindful that not everybody who uses this tool is a developer,
Hmm.
and so we actually have for Actions SDK. That's the developer focused one. That content is really aimed for a developer. The Actions Builder, which is the graphical interface, where you can actually
Hmm.
see everything and you could see the scenes and you could see things pointing to the different scenes.
Hmm.
We made a collab for Actions Builder that will help you build an action. It does have some code, but it's literally copy paste and
Oh wow.
push the buttons. You're not
Okay.
actually having to have a terminal or like anything else. It's all in the
Hmm.
GUI. So it makes it a lot friendlier and you can do
Okay.
some really fun stuff with it.
That's really, really cool. That's awesome. Is there like a website that people can log on to get started? We can probably link that in the description as well.
Oh my gosh, totally. So we do have a whole site when it comes to all our code labs that we have.
Hmm.
The one I'm talking in particular is for Actions Builder, and
Yeah.
there's level 1 and level 2.
Oh, cool.
And that one, you're actually building this really silly game where you pick out of 3 items something, and this person will give you their fortune or your
Hmm.
fortune based off of what you pick. And some of the prompts are hilarious. Like I had so much fun building it because it was silly.
So you said that you actually created these code labs or like you wrote them yourself. That's super awesome.
Yeah.
So that's almost like you had to like I'm imagine like watch people build like these voice skills and these actions and then figure out how do we teach, new people how to build.
Exactly, exactly. When it comes especially to a new tooling, like with the Actions Building
Hmm.
Actions SDK, I was teaching my coworkers how to build. And so
Oh
I
wow.
was always taking notes. I was doing little trainings and I would frame things differently of like, oh, it's kind of like this and it's kind of
Yeah.
like that. And then depending on if I got the like, oh, I get it, that's when I would write my little notes like, okay, this idea makes sense to
This works.
people or this concept. And that's because I'm always thinking back in my mind, how can I turn around and teach this to
Yeah.
people outside? But the fun thing is being able to play with that. I worked really closely with a conversation designer that we have internally,
Hmm.
and I had her like review the prompts because I want to make sure we're not just designing these collabs just to teach the technical part because
Right.
I find that personally kind of on the easier side.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the conversation design, I want to kind of sprinkle some of those elements. So
Yeah.
even when it came to asking, out of the three things to pick, being able to have an intent. If somebody says, I want this other thing, to be able to
Yeah.
acknowledge them and
Yeah.
go, we can't do that, but you can do these three, and be able
Yeah.
to redirect the conversation.
Hmm.
So definitely sprinkling that stuff in. But I wasn't the only one who wrote it. I have a
Hmm.
fantastic tech writer. After I kind of mapped it all out and wrote the
Yeah.
bulk of it, she made it beautifully. Like it's written so well. I'm not the best writer, and she just made it where you could read it and you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, which is great.
I am so excited to check it out. You've been hyping this thing up. I have weekend plans now. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. And if you want, if you're like, I'm not really down to doing this, I just remembered,
Mhm.
I recorded a video of me doing it.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
be- yeah, because I'm the type of learner that I need to see to understand, and I
Yeah.
can't just read something and
Right.
go, yeah, that makes sense. So I sat down and I recorded. It's like an hour long. It's a long video, but it's me going, this is why we did this, and when you do
Hmm.
that, you have to consider these things. So it's really like in depth, and like if you want to go in that deep dive,
Yeah.
I jump into the pool with you.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that there's like several different ways to learn it because in this space, like you said, there's so many people coming from so many different backgrounds and probably so many different learning styles. So having that, like a guide and then a video and different formats to digest in just means that more people are going to understand it and more people are going to be building, which is so cool.
Exactly. And I also came from a non-tech place. So
Hmm.
my first 10 years of my career, I
Yeah,
was doing nonprofit work. And so I'm definitely like, I know how it feels when you're like, I'm going this tech space. It's scary. So
yeah,
the more we can make it easier or
yeah.
less intimidating,
Hmm.
I think the better. We get more people involved. Ah.
Yeah, I agree. So you have probably seen so many different actions and voice assistants and just like more than like anyone else I'm imagining. And I'm wondering, what's your favorite?
Oh, it's like asking favorites of your children. You can't do that. um, Right now, something I'm having a lot of fun playing is an action called Mind Jam,
Okay.
where it's pretty much it gives you. It looks like an old school game where you have a word and you're supposed to mime it to
Hmm.
the group of people. So it's with a smart display and it has a timer, and so it shows you the different words and it keeps
Oh.
score. And you have teams. It's really cute.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cool. Is it almost like
yeah,
charades?
oh, almost like charades. Exactly,
That's cool.
exactly.
That's
Yeah, so that one's really fun. I've been really enjoying that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a Google Home at home, and I at home, um, and I don't have a screen yet for it.
Mm,
So I haven't been able to play any games using the screen, but I do just have like the regular one, and I do
yeah.
like talking to it. There's a lot of witty answers it gives me back.
Oh my,
Yeah,
Google Assistant is like the personality of Google Assistant is a lot of fun. Like
yeah,
the questions people ask is
hmm,
amazing because I would have never asked that, but
yeah.
someone needs to think of how does it respond.
Yeah, I'm like so curious, like to the person who actually thinks about like all of the possible things that, users ask and respond because I
Yeah.
feel like it has like a bigger personality than I do and it's like quicker than I am. So it's very cool.
No, I hear you. And it's actually a big team that does it. We have
Hmm.
several people who work on that, which makes sense once I learned that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why it's so on top of everything. But I believe even some of the conversation designers have like comedy backgrounds, like they're stand-up
Ooh,
comics
yeah,
as well. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
that's
So
really cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I was speaking a couple weeks ago to a conversation designer who used to be a playwright. And he
Mm,
was talking about how like when he would write his plays and his screens, it's so similar to conversation design, and I thought that was super
right?
interesting.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. It
Mhm.
is really similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jessica, thank you so much for your time today and all of your really helpful suggestions.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did too, and I'm gonna make sure that all of the great resources that you talked about
Mm.
today are linked in the comments below. So anyone who wants to get started can get started like right now.
Yay, thank you.
Awesome.